Good evening, everyone. I am Councillor Denise Massoud, Mayor of Whitehorse, and I welcome you all to tonight's Ordinary Council meeting. I remind councillors that the meeting, other than the confidential meeting, is being recorded and the audio recording made available publicly on our council website tomorrow. Our purpose is to provide greater access to council debate and decision making and encourage openness and transparency. However, council accepts no liability for any individual opinions or statements. Councillors and officers, please ensure your microphones are on when speaking. I formally open this council meeting and ask you all to stand for the opening prayer and statement. We give thanks, O God, for the men and women of the past, whose generous devotion to the common good has been the making of our city. Grant that our own generation may build worthily on the foundations they have laid. Direct our minds that all we plan and determine is for the well-being of our city. Amen. In the spirit of reconciliation, Whitehorse City Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri people as the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on, and we pay our respects to their elders past and present. Please be seated. I would now like to introduce our councillors and senior officers. Councillors on my left, Councillor Andrew Munro.
Good evening and welcome.
Councillor Bill Bennett.
Good evening all and welcome.
Councillor Raylene Carr.
Good evening everyone, it's lovely to see you.
Councillor Andrew Davenport.
Good evening and welcome.
Councillor Sharon Ellis.
Good evening everyone, welcome to our meeting.
And on my right, Councillor Tina Liu.
Good evening everyone and thank you for coming tonight.
Councillor Blair Barker.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming.
Councillor Prue Cutts.
Good evening everyone and welcome.
And Councillor Ben Stennett.
Good evening, welcome.
And staff on my left, Chief Executive Officer Miss Nolene Duff.
Good evening.
General Manager Human Services Miss Terry Wilkinson.
Good evening.
General Manager City Development Mr Jeff Green.
Good evening.
And on my right, Executive Manager Governance and Customer Service Mr Tony DeFazio.
Good evening, Noel.
Team Leader Governance Miss Jenny Russell.
Good evening.
General Manager Corporate Services Mr Peter Smith.
Good evening.
General Manager Infrastructure Mr Philip Warner.
Good evening.
And in the gallery, General Manager Communications Miss Sally Freud. Hannah Rowlands, Communications Coordinator. And Mosma Tate, Senior Corporate Planner. Item 2 states apologies, but we have no apologies this evening. Item 3 is disclosures of conflict. Councillors and officers, are there any disclosures of conflict of interests in regard to matters to be considered on tonight's agenda? If so, I will require a disclosure of that interest and the nature of that interest. There being none, we will move to item 4, confirmation of minutes. Councillors, we have listed on the agenda the minutes from our last meeting requiring confirmation by council. Can I have a motion to confirm the minutes of the ordinary and confidential council meeting held on the 18th of September 2017?
So moved, Mayor.
Moved Councillor Cutts and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Moving to item 5, responses to questions. Council provides the opportunity for anyone present in the gallery to submit a question in writing on the forms provided in accordance with Clause 18 of our Meeting Procedure Local Law for which we will endeavour to provide a response. I will ask the Chief Executive Officer whether there are any questions submitted.
No questions this evening, Mayor.
Thank you. So we move to item 6, notices of motion, and we have none this evening. We now move to item 7, which is petitions. Councillors, are there any petitions for tabling tonight? There being no petitions, I will move to item 8, urgent business. Councillors, do we have any items of urgent business? There being none, we now move to the main part of our evening, which is the council reports under item 9. Councillors, we have a number of reports to consider tonight listed under City Development, Infrastructure, Human Services and Corporate. I will introduce each report in the order listed and will then call for a motion in regard to the item. Our first item is 9.1.1, 4 Longbray Avenue, Forest Hill, construction of 2 detached double-storey dwellings. Can I have a mover?
Yes, Mayor.
Moved Councillor Bennett. And a seconder?
Happy to second, Madam Mayor.
Seconded Councillor Carr. Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Thanks, Mayor. Councillors, this motion is to do with the recommendation from the officer report that the application be supported but subject to conditions. So, councillors, look, I do understand the concerns of the objectors to this application, and I certainly do have empathy with them, especially the next door property at number 6 Longbray Avenue. The conditions imposed as part of the officer report go some way to reduce the perceived amenity impacts. The overshadowing issue is a real one, but the reality is that after double checking, it does comply with the requirements of Res Code. A single-storey development that had been suggested would certainly reduce any overshadowing impact, but again, developments in this general residential zone allow for 2-storey developments and indeed encourage a variety of dwelling types and increase usage of available land. The Whitehorse planning scheme seeks to manage appropriate neighbourhood character outcomes, and in fact this development proposes one dwelling behind the other will have reduced streetscape impact. The original plans proposed 2 crossovers, but this has now been reduced to 1 crossover on the north side with the retention of the existing street tree. This will also assist with on-street car parking. Councillors, the development proposes to moonscape this property, and certainly this is not what this council wants to encourage. But I note, however, that the arborist report indicates that none of the existing trees are significant and that it has been conditioned to plant 1 large canopy tree and 3 medium to small canopy trees in the front setback and a canopy tree in the secluded open space for both dwellings 1 and dwelling 2. Also, it is a condition to plant around the perimeter of the site with trees and shrubs, including screen planting along the northern boundary of dwelling 2. The end result will be a net increase in trees and vegetation for this development. So, overall, I understand the concerns. I do support the application in line with the officer report and encourage your support also. So I move that the motion be accepted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with Councillor Bennett. I have absolute sympathy for the residents. I thank them all for taking the time and trouble to lodge their objections, and I would encourage all residents to lodge an objection if they so desire for any application that they don't necessarily agree with. It does influence the conditions that we put on our councillor reports, and it does, in that case, it does influence the future development. So it's very important to hear from residents and hear what they have to say and what their major concerns are. Now, in saying that, there are a couple of things I don't necessarily like about this application. One of them is the gravel driveway and the design of the laundry facilities fronting Unit 1. However, neither of these are enough to reject the application. Overall, the design is to be commended for achieving an 8-star energy rating, and the gravel driveway permits greater permeability. So, while I don't like it personally, it adds to the development, it adds to the permeability, so it does have its advantages. The application complies with car parking, overshadowing, and exceeds the requirement for private open space. It actually ticks all the boxes, so we have no grounds for refusal. If this was to go to VCAT, to just express a well-known comment, if you like, we'd be laughed out of court. We seriously wouldn't get past first base, and it would cost us, a council, thousands and thousands of dollars to fight it at VCAT. And honestly, when we have nothing to fight with, we can't do it. As much as we may like or dislike a development, we're not here to make personal choices. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Is there a speaker against the motion? Are there any further speakers for the motion? There being none, I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried unanimously. We now move to item 9.1.2, 34 to 36 Prospect Street, Box Hill. Do I have a mover?
So moved.
Moved, Councillor Munro. And a seconder?
Happy to second.
Seconded, Councillor Ellis. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The application before Council for 34 to 36 Prospect Street, Box Hill, is for the construction of a 30-storey multi-use building comprising of retail premises, office space, dwellings and basement car parking. Prospect Street, for those that aren't aware, is between Whitehorse Road and the railway line, very much in the centre of Box Hill, which is currently an office precinct. We had 4 objector properties in relation to this application, 3 of which are immediately abutting the proposed site for the application, and 1 just on the other side of the railway line. And they raised a couple of issues that are addressed in the report before you tonight. The recommendation tonight is to grant a notice of issuance of a permit for this site. And of course, there's a whole series of conditions that are being attached to that, and a couple of which I will highlight. That a minimum of 7 apartments be clearly designated for social or affordable housing. All residential balconies must have a minimum of 8 square metres, uninterrupted by any plant or equipment. There needs to be the provision of play equipment and playable elements for children, such as sculptures and seating elements in the communal areas. Provision of bicycle hoops at the front of the entrances and in the retail areas. None of the building can encroach on the road reservation, and the conditions go on quite considerably over quite a number of pages, the conditions in relation to this application, but not surprising given the size and scope of the application. The site's currently occupied by a 2-level commercial building serviced by an Undercroft car park, and so they will be replaced by the building that's mentioned. What's proposed is 187 apartments, commercial use and retail and office within the building as well, and 5 basement levels of car parking to accommodate those. It is quite a substantial building, and of course it fits in with the local policy framework that we have. Clause 2106 for housing notes that the City of Whitehorse is under increased pressure to accommodate more people who are attracted to the area due to the strategic location, high amenity, residential areas and the quality of services and facilities. This, of course, is in the centre of the Box Hill Metropolitan Activity Centre. It has good access to parklands, Box Hill Gardens, Kingsley Gardens are all within 300, 500 metres from the site, and of course the major transport hub is close by. So, councillors, I think this is an effective use of that land. I'll note one point made by the objectors, and that was that this is predominantly a commercial precinct. Councillors are probably aware that the local government, the state government imposes on local government planning provisions that talk about activation of commercial areas, and having residences mixed into commercial areas in mixed-use developments activates those areas 24 hours a day. It means that they're not just occupied 9 to 5 or 8 to 6. These are areas that will get an injection of life both after hours and on weekends by the mixture of having residences and of course the cafes and the like that will support those. So it is an effective use of the land, and it is effectively mandated by state government policy now to activate these areas. There is commercial use within the proposed site, and that is complemented by the other uses as outlined. I urge councillors to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Munro.
Mayor, I have an amendment. I'd like to move an amendment.
We need to hear the seconder first, so Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Councillor Munro has covered it all very well. I guess he hit on the fact that mixed-use development is a good use for that particular area, and that state government policy almost directs us into that regard. It is something that 10 years ago I may not have quite warmed to this development, but times have changed, policies have changed, the direction from the government has changed, and the advantage is this is an area that can take development. This particular area can take extra dwellings, extra commercial sites and restaurants and all sorts of things that the community are crying out for. But for me, the most important element is the affordable housing sites. The 7 units that the developer is going to be providing is a real boost for Whitehorse, especially as they're going to be in a building that will have mixed use, will have commercial, retail, and will have eating places, etc., and it's right next to public transport, and it will be integrated in this large building. So that to me is a great win for the whole community. And the advantage of these dwellings in this site in Box Hill, where there's transport, where there's already density, is that it takes the pressure off the adjoining areas, the other parts of Box Hill and Box Hill North, etc., that may otherwise have experienced more development. For me, this is a win-win for the community, and I urge my colleagues to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis.
Mayor, I have an amendment that I'd like to move.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport. Can we display the amendment? We'll just wait 1 minute and put it up. Now, it's quite extensive. Perhaps we will take it as displayed. If you would like to give a very succinct overview, because the recording, people who will listen to the recording from tomorrow might like to know what the amendment is about.
Yes, Mayor. This amendment essentially deletes conditions 7 and 8 in the council agenda and replaces it with conditions 7, 8, 9, and then you need to subsequently renumber, and it expands the number of ways the developer can provide social housing or affordable housing to meet the condition 7 in particular within the city of Whitehorse.
Do you have a seconder, Councillor Davenport?
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Councillor Davenport.
Mayor, would you like to ask the mover and seconder if it's acceptable to them first?
As a formal amendment, we've moved and seconded, so we go in and
Okay,
you
thank
speak to your amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, I draw your attention to this particular amendment to modify affordable housing conditions within this particular proposal. As you know, councillors, my general position is not to support affordable housing within developments at all because it places an unfair burden within the other users of that particular development by increased prices to subsidise those particular affordable housing. And I personally believe that affordable housing is best met. It's a community-wide issue and therefore should be met by a community-wide solution and funding. However, past motions that have been carried by council don't agree with that position that I hold, and so this particular amendment is changing the conditions to make our approach consistent with the previous application at 820 Whitehorse Road that dealt with affordable housing and went to VCAT. As you know, affordable housing and placing conditions like these are outside the planning scheme and would have, in my opinion, low likelihood of success if it went to VCAT. So I think by giving many different ways for a developer to meet the condition of affordable housing enables the objectives of council to be met in terms of policy objectives, but it also gives the developer ability to meet these objectives. There are three in this particular circumstance. Either provide 7 dwellings on site, 2, and if they don't want to do that or can't do that for some reason, provide 7 units into a different model, affordable housing model, by providing units, but something that's acceptable to the City of Whitehorse. Or the third way is to provide the equivalent amount of money to a affordable housing provider for them to build units or residences within the City of Whitehorse. Councillors, in this particular area, typically for affordable housing, one of the rules is that you offer the rents at 25% below market rent. If I understand the proponents at 820 Whitehorse Road, when they discussed affordable housing, they said if you put affordable housing in a development such as this one, the body corporate fees and the market rents are very, very high. And so even if you take 25% off that, then you're still left with a high rent that would consume a significant proportion of income for people that qualify for those particular dwellings. It's my opinion that if the developer doesn't want to do that and provide a monetary contribution, then you could build somewhere else within the city that enables a much lower market rent and therefore a much higher ability for people to afford those rents if they were successful with those particular units. We are fortunate within the City of Whitehorse to have a substantial amount of public transport coverage, not just within Box Hill, but Nunawading, Mitcham, Heatherdale, and plus the light rail corridor down Burwood Highway and Riversdale Road. So there is a number of opportunities where other sites could be built, and therefore I think that the flexibility should be given to the developer, so it's a win for the community in terms of the policy development area, but it also allows for more lower rents to be paid in those affordable housing areas. And finally, it's a consistent approach. What I'm proposing here is consistent with what council officers agreed to at VCAT with the proponents of 820, and we should have a consistent approach to this particular situation. I urge you to support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport. Councillor Barker.
Thanks, Mayor. I think Councillor Davenport's covered the important points really well in terms of the consistency of our approach. I think it's really important here that we're actually providing this applicant with options that enable them to deliver the effective outcomes for the people that will enjoy a benefit from this. This is a very high quality development, and it needs to be. This is a development with a swimming pool and gymnasiums, and I'm not saying people that qualify for a 25% lower rent don't deserve that. Of course, everyone would love that amenity. But this provides those inherent services in this building are going to come with a cost. And, you know, by making the financial contribution to the affordable housing specialists, they know housing far better than we do, and they know affordable and social housing far better than this developer will. This developer's building a property to make a profit, which is fair enough, and they're going to do it so that it's consistent with the broader area. And I don't think it's fair to limit their options to just providing a donation of these buildings, because I think that this provides flexibility. The more flexibility, the greater likelihood that we're delivering real outcomes to people in terms of the affordable social housing. And of course it takes the weight off those affordable housing organisations that need to pay very high strata fees to maintain what are very high quality, high standard buildings. I support the amendment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Is there a speaker against the amendment?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. May I say from the outset that the developer has offered the 7 units to be included in the permit. It is their initiative. They've come to us and they've said they're willing to donate 7 dwellings. It's not as if we're having to haggle with them, and they may be quite happy with it that way. That's why they'd offered it to us in the first place. Now, there's a problem with the other scenarios that Councillor Davenport has mentioned, such as a monetary contribution to a housing association provider, and the other way he feels it could be done, that it won't be in this building. And the reason we want it in this building is, firstly, it's got public transport nearby, it's got a lifestyle offering for the people, regardless of what their incomes are. And more importantly, it is integrated within a large building, which is what we want for affordable housing these days. Now, to give this money to a housing provider, they may in fact build it in a site that's not acceptable to us in Whitehorse. It may not even be in Whitehorse effectively. It may be in the eastern region. If it was in Whitehorse, it may be in the periphery of Whitehorse, down the east end, and it could be in a collective of dwellings, all affordable. And that's not the model we want in Whitehorse. We want it to be integrated. We want it to be in a large development, which is what the the applicant has offered. And okay, there may be a swimming pool, but gee, that'd be great for the people. Why shouldn't they have a little bit of luxury? Councillor Davenport did comment that the body corporate fees will be probably prohibitive to the people that are going to be living there. No, they won't, because the housing provider will be setting the rent standard based on it. They'll be picking up all the costs that are associated. It'll be rented back to the people at 25% below market rate. Now, that may or may not include the extra bit for the body corporate, but those people are not going to be left with a bill that they can't meet, rent that they can't meet. So please vote against this alternate from Councillor Davenport. Thank you.
Yeah, this is an amendment. Is there a speaker for the amendment? Is there another speaker against the amendment?
Madam Mayor.
Councillor Munro.
Councillors, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The applicant has agreed with council, as Councillor Ellis said, to provide these units as part of their application process. So why muddy the water in in putting these additional proposals or conditions on the planning permit effectively after the fact. I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Davenport that the state and federal government should be doing more in terms of social housing. But there is a massive shortfall of available properties, and wishing will not fix it overnight. This is actually tangible, real action that one tier of government is prepared to make and will deliver outcomes for our community. And it is for our community. And councillors, I remind you, we're talking about affordable and social housing. Affordable housing being housing at a price that people on lower incomes can afford, and social housing, those in needs and perhaps disabilities have access to housing stock that they may not otherwise have done. And it's important that some of our community have access to some of these properties in a location like Box Hill. So we're talking about the cleaners and the wait staff at the hospital and at the restaurants to be able to live in the community where they work. And Councillor Davenport's right. We could actually buy more properties. We could buy more apartments in Cranbourne or Craigieburn or Melton for the price of a property in Box Hill.
Point of order, Mayor. Councillor Munro making statements about funds outside of Whitehorse, but the motion says it's funds within the city of Whitehorse. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport. Continue, Councillor Munro.
Councillors, I'm making the point that it's all well and good to buy cheaper properties, or we could even buy, I don't think we have any caravan parks in the city of Whitehorse, but if we did, we could have detachable homes at a much lesser cost than apartments in the centre of Box Hill. But it's appropriate we do have social housing throughout our community, affordable housing throughout our community, so people who work in our community can actually live and participate in our community, and that's what we're affording the people in Box Hill through the multiple projects now that will deliver affordable housing within Box Hill, close to where the jobs are that some of those people will work. It is an excellent outcome. The developer has agreed with council to do this. As I said, councillors, don't muddy the water with this amendment. Please reject it.
Is there a speaker for the amendment? Are there any further speakers against the amendment?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Cutts.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to talk about Councillor Davenport's discussion about consistency with 820 Whitehorse Road, and I think the word was council needs to be consistent. Well, I think what we've pointed to here is that 820 Whitehorse Road did not offer affordable housing, and at this particular development they have, and I think we're talking about two different things. So that was all I wanted to make my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cutts. Are there any further speakers to this amendment? Councillor Carr.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to speak against the amendment. Very simple reasons, really. It's almost, I know I'm stretching it a little bit, but it's almost like going back to when we put people into institutions. And I know that's a gross, exaggeration of this, but I go back to Councillor Ellis's comment that by giving money to a housing institution, they then have the option, whether it might still be in the city of Whitehorse, that's fair enough, as Councillor Davenport's wishes, but I would suggest it wouldn't be. We would not be integrating them, which is what we should be doing. These people, they deserve our respect. There's nothing wrong with them. Why are we ostracising them and giving this money to a housing association that they will choose what to do with the money? They will choose where these people should live. And if they choose to put them into this concrete jungle and a housing institution, we won't have any say in it whatsoever. We will just have to go along and agree. Now, I'm sorry, I don't want that for our residents. I want them to be integrated. I want them to be equal. I want them to have everything that we have. And there is no reason on earth why they shouldn't. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Are there any further speakers? There being none, I will put the amendment to the vote. Those in favour of including the amendment within the substantive motion? Those against? The motion is lost. We now move back to the original substantive motion.
Mayor,
Councillor Barker.
I've got another amendment.
We'll just put it up on the screen. Again, there is a fair bit highlighted overall. If you could succinctly, for the purposes of people listening to the audio, explain what this amendment is, and then we will take it as displayed.
Thank you, Mayor, I will. Councillors, this is a very, very simple amendment. It's about providing living green plantings.
Excuse me, Councillor Barker, you just need to outline the amendment, and then I will seek a seconder, and then you get to speak to it.
Okay, Mayor, sorry.
Thank you.
Councillors, this is an amendment to include green plantings on the vertical surfaces of the building to improve the sustainable design and improve the harmony with the area. The second, what's on the screen now, there is a further... I'm waiting for it to come up. And this is about the landscaping, which actually provides the maintenance and the appropriate sort of engineering of these green plantings. And the final amendment is just to the art strategy, where this is making sure that the applicant can use the continuation of the green living treatment plantings design thematic in the foyer, effectively in the public space. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Do you have a seconder?
Happy to second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Liu. Councillor Barker.
Thanks very much, Mayor. Friends, councillors, this is a very, very simple amendment. This is about providing green living plantings to the vertical surfaces of this big building, so that the design articulates harmony with the surrounding areas, which, as we know, are Melbourne's leafy green suburbs: Churchill Street, Mont Albert, Dorking Road, Box Hill North, McKean Street, Box Hill North. Councillors, at the moment, you've seen them, the ATO building, even Whitehorse Towers, dystopian cubes, reflective gold, shimmering, cylindrical type structures that tower into the air. They're sterile, they're intrusive, they're menacing, they're alien, and they repel people. Our designers talk about the articulation of a building at podium level, because that's where people interact with it, where they walk along it. Well, I say enough of that narrative. We need to start to understand how a building articulates with the broader area, because a 30-storey building articulates with the surrounding areas 3, 4, 5 kilometres away. Because I can see the ATO building, I can see Whitehorse Towers from my backyard. It's on Tuesday morning, after our last meeting when we discussed this, I was walking across Springfield Park with my dog Paddy. About 7:30 in the morning, I'll have you know. My dog wasn't named after the gentleman from the media. And it was like a tractor beam reflecting off Whitehorse Towers right into my eyes. It was intrusive and it was menacing. This is your chance. This is our chance to change the game, to change this building so that we've got a building that people want to interact with, that people want to be around, that people want to go and have a coffee at the base of it in the coffee shop there, where children want to ride up there on a Sunday with their parents and look at it because it's beautiful and because it has some harmony with our area. Plan Melbourne talks about how the metropolitan activity centres need to improve surrounding areas, and this is the great, great, great opportunity. Councillors, the applicant started this design thematic. You'll note there are plantings on the roof. There are green walls at podium level. I say let's encourage some ambition with our applicant and tell them to fill their boots, go hard and finish it. Make it beautiful. You know who the winners are here? The winners are endless. And The developer wins because they know they're going to get even more people rushing to buy these wonderful apartments. The developer wins. The residents are going to win because they'll have lower cooling costs, lower heating costs. The residents will enjoy a nicer place. The area, Box Hill Central, will improve. It'll become a place where every probus group in Melbourne wants to catch the tram or train there for a cup of tea and a bun to look at this building. Because we know this is a well-established science, engineering and landscaping, that it's going to make the building cooler in summer, warmer in winter, it'll be quieter, it'll have lower operating costs, it even has improved mental health for people. And it'll give even the area cleaner air. There are no losers here. It's just a win. And you know how people are saying they interact and how they feel about these dystopian cylinders and cubes. And that might be confronting because in the past some may have voted for them. But I'm saying we know that planning is an iterative process. Councillors, this is your chance. It's your chance to make a difference, to make people want to be at Box Hill Central, to make these towers something that you can be proud of in 25 years. I encourage you, support this amendment. You'll be proud of yourself and your grandchildren will be proud of you. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I think this amendment to expand the green wall would not only provide environmental and aesthetic benefits, but it also will have a distinct green flair to the building and a smoother transition that is also more sympathetic to its surrounds. As set by various examples in Melbourne, interstate and overseas, it is shown that high-rise developments can at times be artistically and environmentally inspiring and also architecturally, innovative masterpieces embraced by the community. So I think we could certainly draw learnings and inspirations from such developments moving forward, and I'm happy to support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Liu. Is there a speaker against the amendment? Are there any further speakers for the amendment?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Bennett.
Thanks, Mayor. Well, Councillor Barker certainly got me excited, so I thought I'd better say a few words because certainly after that performance, no one could possibly speak against this amendment. But I wanted to make a few points that may be more of a practical nature, in that I think this is an opportunity for the City of Whitehorse to demonstrate leadership in this space. And certainly this sort of initiative does demonstrate world best practice in my view. And I think that, that generations in the future will say what a fantastic initiative that this was put to council and was approved enthusiastically. Also, I'm not in the habit of talking about soul, but I think that that's a word that came to mind with this sort of initiative that that gives something that's quite unique and something that's important for our developing city, and that's soul. And I think the part of the amendment was to do with the artistic side of things, and I think that's important too, because I think that demonstrates that buildings are just buildings, but it's people that we need to cater for, and people are multifaceted, and I think the art of the built form and art included within that structure is an important part of developments in the city centre. So I do wholeheartedly support this, and I thank Councillor Barker for bringing this amendment to the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Are there any further speakers to this amendment?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Cutts.
I fully support this amendment and think that this could be a great precedent that we're setting here. We know, unfortunately, that there will be more towers going up in Box Hill, and I think that if this is going to be something that we are recommending, this will be taken notice of by future people coming to us with development proposals. I think it's good that we can take a line in the sand and say this is something that we want to do, we want to be leaders in this area, and I support this wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Councillor Cutts. Any other speakers? Councillor Ellis.
Just briefly, Madam Mayor, I think it's a wonderful initiative. I think it's bringing some greenery and some, I suppose, nature to what is becoming, I agree with Councillor Barker, a bit of a sterile area with all of our towers. And I really do believe the people in the 7 social and affordable housings will love every minute of it. I think it will be a real asset for Box Hill, and it brings us in contact with nature, and anything that does that has got my vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Does anyone else wish to speak to this amendment? Councillor Carr.
Madam Mayor, sitting here, I'm making myself sort of smile, I guess, if you like. I do agree with this. I think it's a great idea, and it will bring a fresh approach to Box Hill, which I think Box Hill is sadly in need of, a desperate need of. This reason for my inward smile is I'm also looking forward to all the little birds that will nest in these green walls and call it their home. And perhaps it may not make having a coffee as pleasant as it could be, but let's hope it does, and let's hope they put barriers in place that the birds don't interact with the people having coffee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. There are any further speakers? Councillor Stennett.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to speak in support of this and say that it's probably going to make our neighbours green with envy.
Well said, Councillor Stennett. If there are no further speakers, I will put this amendment to the vote, and if it is supported, it will become included in the substantive. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. And we now go back to the substantive motion, which includes the amendment we have just discussed.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move an amendment, please.
Thank you, Councillor Liu. Can we pop that up on the screen? Then I'll ask you to just outline what the amendment is quickly, and then I will ask for a seconder.
So, councillors, this amendment looks at making 2 additions as under Part B of the recommendation, which looks at 2 of the 4 office tenancies to be denoted as being for community, education and or health-related service providers, and H, the provision of 9 additional car parking spaces to be denoted as being for retail uses. Thank you.
Do you have a seconder, Councillor Liu?
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillors, we're all aware that Box Hill has been designated as one of the key metropolitan activity centres in Melbourne. And as per Victorian State Planning Framework, which envisions higher density living at the core of Box Hill. However, I think developers and we as council have a social responsibility of thinking about the bigger picture and how such developments can benefit the broader community. When I look at an application such as this one, what I also place importance on is building usage and how we can maximise the benefit for not only the future residents and occupiers of this development, but also the wider community. My motion takes into consideration this and provides better opportunities for locals to have access to community, education and health-related services. With the growth in Box Hill and Greater Whitehorse, it is becoming more and more imperative for developers, the state government and council to provide better access to these key services and give more back to our community for current and future generations to come. The parking provision is to also reinstate the 9 retail parking spots, which will ease the pressure of the already high parking demands in the area. So I hope my fellow councillors could support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Liu. Councillor Barker.
Oh, thanks very much, Mayor. I'm seconding this motion. Car parking in Box Hill is incredibly problematic. Now, even when we get to self-driving and electric cars, people are still going to need to park them and charge them somewhere. And I don't think the applicant should be able to simply depend on the vicinity car parks because they've made their investment in their car parks for their own building. So why should this applicant necessarily use the car parks that another owner up there has invested in? They've invested in them fairly. Now, some might be sceptical as to the Note A, which is the offices to be used for community education or health-related services. I was thinking about this, and particularly Councillor Ellis's affordable housing. You know, and if these offices are used for, say, you know, radiology or, you know, an IVF clinic or x-rays or a GP or something like that, or, you know, a Kumon, you know, a mathletics thing, I think that would be better than having a nightclub where there's doof, doof, doof music and people taking synthetic cannabis. So I'd urge you all to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Are there any speakers against the amendment?
Madam Mayor.
Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, I speak in relation to 1A, and I'm seriously concerned of the ramifications of what's being asked of this particular applicant in terms of their planning permit. What we're saying here, 2 of the 4 office tenancies, in other words, 50% of the office tenancies being provided for those community education and health related services. My concern is that there may not be a demand for that office space in that location for those type of uses. And it's going to have a twofold impact on the owner of the building, in that if they struggle to get a suitable applicant, the space may remain dormant for some time at a cost, and it also may have a commercial impact in terms of the rents that they can get for that particular space, because the use or the demand's not there. And so if they can't find someone in a suitable category, what can they do? They'd be in breach of their planning permit if they put some other use in there. The concern I have is this is quite arbitrary, as it doesn't apply to other buildings in the area. Now, if we were to develop a policy that a certain percentage of space in a building or a monetary contribution for community facilities was provided, that's fine. But to select one building out in this context, I think is quite problematic. Now, if the motion had have said that we encourage them to try and find that sort of tenant, given that the hospital is close by, that might make some sense in terms of health. It may make some sense in terms of education, but Box Hill Institute is only around the corner, and there may not be surplus need for that education space. Councillors, this is quite arbitrary. It's not backed up by policy, and I think it's a dangerous path for us to go, to be so prescriptive in terms of a planning condition in this way. And if councillors do want to make sure that we adequately provide for these uses, I think we need to do the suitable policy work around that. In terms of the car parking spaces, I don't have any concern, and I would encourage the mover to ask the Mayor to move the motion, or the amendment rather, in the 2 parts as on the screen.
Thank you, Councillor Munro.
I'm happy to do that, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so we will, when we come to vote on this amendment, submit it as 2 parts. the first part being in relation to the 2 of the 4 office tenancies, and the second part being about the 9 car parking spaces. I will now ask if there is a speaker for the motion.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Carr.
Madam Mayor, there will always, considering the growth in population in Box Hill, there will always be a need for community, education and health-related service providers in Box Hill. That will never go away, because if that goes away, so are all the towers, so are all the people. That's not going to happen. We're not going to have a ghost town in Box Hill, trust me. Never going to happen. And the applicant can always apply for an amendment to their planning permit in future years if they have trouble obtaining, professional services to fill these places. If they're having trouble, they can't get a community use or they can't get a health provider, they can always apply on the grounds that they are having difficulty filling these. It's not set in concrete. So let's just let it go as it is. I'm fully supportive of, and I will be voting for both of them because I fully support both of them. I think this is a great initiative on behalf of the ward councillors. I think they've done well.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Is there a speaker against the amendment?
Yes, ma'am.
Councillor Bennett.
Well, I'm conflicted, I guess, because I do support 1A, but I don't support 1H. So I'll talk about my non-support for 1H, and it's, I guess, a practical but also philosophical position that I take about car parking spaces in this modern world. We need to look for alternatives because increasing car parking spaces is just not sustainable moving into the future. More spaces means more cars. To have a city that's car dependent is not, in my mind, the wisest course of action. A city that's going to be sustainable into the future and will work in the future is one that's for people and not for cars. So I think we need to wean our community off their dependence on cars and look at ways of making people spaces and placemaking uppermost in our minds. It is of the reality that for those cities that have concentrated on making people spaces as their priority, that it's actually better for business. Might seem counterintuitive to some people, but certainly the facts bear out that the more time people actually spend as a pedestrian in a business precinct, the better it is for business. So I don't support making additional car parking spaces because I think it is not the wisest course of action. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Is there a speaker for the amendment? And I accept you may want to split the 2 parts as Councillor Bennett did.
Yes.
And Councillor Munro. Councillor Ellis.
Yes, I've been sitting here listening. I've had a number of thoughts go through my head. The first is that on item A, I would have liked to have seen priority given to 2 of the 4 office tenancies for that particular usage. But the fact is that we are living in what is essentially a health precinct and an education precinct. So I don't think there's going to be all that much risk in filling them with those related services. On the subject of H, I have to disagree very strongly with Councillor Bennett. He's urging that we not be car dependent, but the reality is we may have ample transport within Box Hill, but it depends where you're coming from, quite frankly. Not everybody has availability to public transport at their point of departure. And I think of the logistics for me, even in Whitehorse, getting to Box Hill itself without a car. It's a very long process. And if you are in fact wanting to meet with community education or health-related service providers, you mightn't be in the right frame of mind or health to be negotiating several items of transport. So no, I'm all for additional car parking spaces because that keeps the traffic off the street. It keeps the cars off the street. So yes, although I'm still a little bit iffy about A, at the risk of not voting for it, which I actually think would be a shame because the intent is very clear, and I do believe that that yes, it can be filled. I definitely will be supporting the 9 additional car spaces. That's, to me, is non-negotiable.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Is there a further speaker to this amendment? There being none, I will put the amendment in the 2 separate parts to the vote. So the first part that we will vote on is 1A, relating to the 2 out of 4 office tenancies to be denoted as being for office administrative-based functions of the community, education and or health-related service providers. All those in favour of that part of the amendment? That part is carried. I will now put 1H, which says the provision of 9 additional car parking spaces. Sorry, I didn't ask, was there a vote against on the last one? Is there a... Thank you. That part of the amendment is carried. 1A is carried. I will now put 1H to the vote, which is about the 9 additional car parking spaces to be denoted as being for retail use. All those in favour? Those against? 1H is carried. The amendment is carried in full. Thus, that now also becomes part of the substantive motion. We now go back to the substantive motion, which does include the amendment by Councillor Barker about the greening of the structure, and also the amendment by Councillor Liu about 2 offices or 2 office tenancies for community use, I'll summarise it as, and the 9 additional car parks for retail. We had the mover and the seconder of the original substantive. Do you require further debate of this substantive motion now that we have gone through all of the discussions on the amendments?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Davenport, are you speaking in favour or against this extended substantive motion?
I'll speak in favour.
Go ahead.
Councillors, we've had a substantial debate this evening on this particular site. As you know, I'm not entirely happy with the outcome on affordable housing. However, I think that if the developer wants to take it to VCAT because of the substantial number of conditions, then so be it. But I will make a number of comments in support of this particular application. As you know, within this particular section of Box Hill, a number of towers have been approved. And this particular tower is of similar type of density and form, albeit with some changes with the additional conditions this evening. So it's in keeping with the emerging character for the area. Unfortunately, a number of residents won't be happy with the emerging character of the area, but we have to work within the state government framework that has been given to us. I think with the changes that have been put up, that we are making the best of the circumstances that have been put on us with this particular permit application, and I urge you to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport. Is there any speaker against the motion?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Cutts.
Whilst I totally agree with the amendments which have been made this evening, and the extent to which the developer has come up with some excellent ideas for this particular tower, we must remember this is in an office precinct, and to have 4 office rooms, basic offices, in an office precinct area, I find is inadequate. I also find that with this particular area, it's really just the height that I'm concerned about. I think a 30-storey building near the perimeter of this particular area is too high, and I really think we need to listen to what our residents are saying with regards to this. So whilst I acknowledge the wonderful ideas and amendments this evening, and the other thing I wanted to make was my complete amazement. We only had 4 objections to this. So this is a 30-storey tower going up in Box Hill. We hear about people, residents of Box Hill, complaining about the towers in Box Hill, and yet we've had 4 objections. So I just wanted to bring that up. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cutts. Is there a further speaker for the motion? Any further speakers against the motion? Then I give the mover the right of reply. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I'll address just Councillor Cutts' comments about the height. I'm reminded of the tax office, which was the first building of the current batch of high-rises at 20 storeys. And at the end of the day, we actually had one objector for the revised plans, and he withdrew. And I was quite amazed that that was the situation, that we got that level of objections, which was it was effectively at the end, we had no objections. I think a lot of people accept the height in Box Hill. There are some that don't like it. But in large part, what the height in Box Hill is doing is taking the pressure off North Box Hill, Mont Albert, South Box Hill. We have an increasing population, and that population has to be housed somewhere. And this is providing residences in the centre of Box Hill with access to 3 substantial gardens in close walking distance and a major transport hub, one of the busiest stations in the whole of metropolitan Melbourne, a tram stop adjacent to the site, and an extensive bus network. Now, yes, the transport infrastructure, the bus interchange is dated, and this is a message that we need to continue to send home to the state government, that with all of this development going in Box Hill, over $2 billion of development underway, that the state government needs to do some heavy lifting in terms of the transport interchange and the infrastructure in Box Hill. And council can't be left to be doing all this work on its own. But we have a 36-storey building already uphill from this building. This is 30 storeys downhill, and so it will actually be below the height of the buildings that are already in situ in this site. I think what's important is the quality of the building, the amenity, the interface to the urban realm, how it interacts with the area around it are very important. And this building has quite a lot of, with its art strategy and its play spaces, it's addressing those concerns. I urge councillors to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. I will now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, we are voting on the substantive motion with the 2 amendments. Those against, the motion is carried.
Division.
All those in favour. Councillor Ellis, Councillor Davenport, Councillor Carr, Councillor Bennett, Councillor Munro, Councillor Liu, Councillor Barker, Councillor Stennett, Councillor Massoud. Those against, Councillor Cutts. The motion is carried. We now move to item 9.1.3, fast-track government land service.
Mayor, I have an alternate.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport. We'll put the alternate up. Councillor Davenport, if you would like to outline your alternate, and then I'll seek a seconder.
Mayor, this alternate is seeking to add to the officer's report a request to remove the parking overlay from the land at 1618 Spring Street, Box Hill, which restores the standard parking requirements for residential development rather than the reduced requirements that are currently there.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport. Do you have a seconder?
Yes, he does, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Councillor Davenport.
Councillors, this particular idea that's been put up by Box Hill TAFE to do a rationalisation and move of the campuses to harness value for extending their school is one that I think should be commended, as it's a novel way of being able to provide additional services to the community, especially nursing community, and not increase the burden on the state taxpayer. So I think that the general idea itself is okay, but there are a number of unintended consequences that this particular proposal does bring, which I wanted to highlight to your attention, and it's contained within the officer's report. Firstly, on 1000 Whitehorse Road, which is the site next to the Box Hill Town Hall, it's being sought to be zoned as commercial, and what the officers are recommending is a mixed-use zone. I personally agree with that, especially when you can then apply a development overlay which puts additional guidance in terms of built form, how many stories and so on. So it's in keeping with that particular area. I think that's a good idea. Second, on 16 to 18 Spring Street, Box Hill, you'll notice in the officer's report that a number of concerns have been raised in the particular proposal that's been put up, primarily with regards to height. The surrounding area of 16 to 18 is 9 to 14 stories in height. What's being proposed to unlock value is 29 stories. It is way, way higher than what's in the immediate surrounding area. You have to go up to Whitehorse Road. In addition, this particular site doesn't even go onto a major arterial, so you've got a really big tower in some side streets, and that is not heard of within the city of Whitehorse, not to this level. Concerns have been raised by officers with regards to the height. I agree with those as well. The third area, which brings me to the reason why I've raised the alternate, is around car parking for the area. Councillors, I wanted to bring your attention to a bit of history on how the parking overlay came about. There was a central parking, Box Hill Central Activity Centre car parking strategy that undertook a study in 2012 and 2013 for the area. And it showed that there were some areas of underutilisation of car parking and some that are over. In this particular area of Spring Street, most of the off-site car parks were measured at 85 to 100% utilisation, and the surrounding streets, being around the hospitals, were in a high utilisation as well. Since that time, we've approved a number of developments in these particular buildings. There'll become a time when enough is enough. We have to look at increasing the amount of on-site car parks. Now, as I mentioned before, this site's quite high, 29 stories. If it was 9 or 14, okay, keep the parking overlay the way it is. But you are having a substantial number of additional residential dwellings at 29 stories, and those car parks need to be accommodated. Unfortunately for myself, I had to go to emergency down at the Box Hill Hospital for a personal matter about a couple of months ago. When I told them I was a local councillor, do you know what the nurses told me? Parking was their biggest issue. And they go, imagine you finishing 10 o'clock at night after one of your shifts and having to walk over a kilometre to get a day's car parking, because if you're too close, you get booked. And they're on a modest salary, and I feel that the additional volume means that nurses and other people that may be vulnerable would have to walk even further. So we have to play our part on this particular matter and increase the number of car parks. You'll hear tonight, undoubtedly, that it's a change to the planning scheme that wasn't envisaged. I'd agree to a certain extent to that particular argument if it's raised. But what's also clear is that when the parking overlay was put in and when the guidelines and what governed Box Hill was put in, it never envisaged a 29-storey tower being built not on a public arterial. I urge you overall to support this officer recommendation with this slight amendment. I want to thank the officers for the work they've done. I'm putting a robust submission for our consideration tonight, and with this alternate, it makes it better to go to the state government as part of their decision-making process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport. Councillor Barker.
Thanks, Mayor, and I thoroughly endorse and thank Councillor Davenport for his impassioned position on this. He's right. He's absolutely right. Parking in this area, and this is the area that I live and I walk with my kids, and my wife works at Epworth Eastern and Box Hill regularly. The parking is a nightmare. It was only this week that I was in Thames Street talking to one of my residents, taking a photo on the app about the parking complaints. It's absolutely terrible. And I think that, and it should resonate with all councillors, in particular the women. Men don't mind walking the streets at night. I'm not uncomfortable with it. But I know a number of mums from junior football that work there as nurses, and they're parking down at the back of the athletics track. They're parking all the way up in Mersey Street in Box Hill North. That's how far the amount of pressure, and with the growth of Epworth Eastern, with the growth of the hospital, this was never envisaged when that parking was. There is a huge amount of pressure on these streets. And if you look at Thames Street, which is the road that leads to the hospital, it's got the various articulation or chicanes, if you like, and there are no standing signs there, so that hospitals, and emergency service vehicles have to be able to get to this hospital. And if these streets are choked because the state government's let, them wash away all these car parks, you're never going to be able to get to the hospital. The pacemaker and defibrillator technicians are never going to be able to get to the hospital. People that need to go and see their cardiologist are never going to be able to get to the hospital. Friends, this parking here really matters. And the point was made before by Councillor Ellis, and I thought it was a really good one. If you need the hospital, you're very often not in a position to be able to catch public transport. And if you've got a dodgy heart or you've just had open heart surgery, it's most likely that you're being driven there. And of course, as someone that's been a carer for elderly parents, taking them to regular hospital appointments, I know how important that parking is, because what do? Then you drop off, and you've got to drive 4 kilometres away, walk, park, pick up the kids, scurry off to the hospital to try and get to the appointment with a parent. So I think this is an absolutely great initiative. I thank Councillor Davenport for it, and I thank the council officers for their wonderful work on it. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Is there a speaker against this
Yes, ma'am.
motion? Councillor Munro.
Councillors, the use of statistics that Councillor Davenport were using tonight were quite interesting. And of course you can pull statistics in any way you want to support your argument. What's unfortunate in this debate tonight, we're actually talking about quite an important situation for Box Hill in the fast-tracking of some planning questions around 2 major properties, and now all we're doing is debating the removing of parking overlay in one block or two residential street addresses, 16 to 18 Spring Street, and not looking at the substantive issue, and that is, I think, the problem with the way this is headed. What we're talking about, and you're talking about, and we often have this in planning forums, that people talk about everything but the application before council. And councillors, for me, that's what's happening in tonight's debate. We're not talking about this particular location in Spring Street, we're talking about all the ills of parking in Box Hill. This is not a public parking question in terms of the application at 16 to 18 Spring Street. It will be about the calculation of parking for the apartments for the accommodation at the site, not the adding to the public parking pool in the city of Box Hill. And councillors, those rates have been reduced for the centre of Box Hill because we don't want to fill Box Hill up with cars. And you're talking about compounding the problem that has just been articulated by bringing more cars for more apartments into the centre of Box Hill. You're going to compound the problem. You're going to clog those small streets. The formula is based on these people have access to vast levels of public transport in a few minutes walking distance, and you want to wean them off the cars where possible. That's why they have a different schedule. And to excise one property or two street addresses, 16 to 18 Spring Street, out of that just doesn't make any sense. So, councillors, we should be talking about the issues in relation to this land. We perhaps should be talking about the height that is being proposed on this particular site. And I don't think that tonight I'll be supporting this resolution for council to support what the government are presenting to us. But that's a totally different issue. Councillors, I urge you very strongly to reject the amendments to the parking overlay for 1618 Spring Street.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. Is there a speaker for the motion? Is there a speaker against the motion?
Yes, mate.
Councillor Bennett.
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, look, I agree with Councillor Munro. I think we're being sidetracked from the intent of this particular motion. I support the officer's report with the continuation of the existing parking overlay. Though I do note that there are solutions that need to be looked at as far as the safety and security of our residents and our people that are employed in the area, and I understand that there are parking issues that need to be solved. But this is not a way of solving those issues. There are other solutions that maybe should be looked at. I'm thinking of if we're moving to the smart city digital age, to be able to easily see where car parking spaces may be available, and or the introduction of initiatives like a shuttle bus that takes people from where they can park their car to the hospital or wherever. These are the sorts of things that we can think about, but at a later date, not with this particular motion. So, as far as the amendment's concerned, or the alternate, I'd encourage you to stick with the substantive, talk about the issues of parking at a later date. Thank you.
Can I just clarify that this alternate motion is the current substantive motion? Is there a speaker for the motion? Is there a further speaker against the motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Liu.
Thank you. Look, while I appreciate Councillor Davenport's comments regarding parking, I do think the officer's assessment is consistent with the Box Hill MAC structure plan, and the recommendations contained within this report will certainly provide better guidance and parameters around the usage and built form for these two specific sites, as it looks at managing growth and expansion in the area, encouraging additional educational health facilities and student dwellings, whilst also at the same time it respects and is sympathetic to the surrounding area and its buildings and historical and heritage significance. I'm also in support of the recommendation that the Whitehorse Road site is
a recommendation that it should actually be rezoned to a mixed use zone, as it will also ensure that there is a preferred height limit for this area, as opposed to a commercial one zone where there are no height limits imposed. The recommendation that a 15-storey preferred height limit in the Spring Street precinct, I think, is warranted, and the report also emphasises that there needs to be a focus on providing and enhancing educational and healthcare provisions in the area rather than just residential dwellings. And I think one of the other key important parts in the report is that it recommends and highlights the importance of allowing community to review the development plan through a 14-day public exhibition period, giving the opportunity for local feedback, which is reflected in the report. So I'm happy to endorse this report, and just in terms of the parking provisions, I'm happy to stick with our consistent parking overlay. Thank you.
So that was a speech against the alternate.
Yes, it was.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, can I foreshadow moving the substantive if the alternate doesn't get up?
Thank you, Councillor Munro. Are there any further speakers to this alternate motion? There being none, I will give Councillor Davenport the right of reply.
Waive my right.
I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour of the alternate motion? Those against? The motion is lost.
Division.
All those in favour? Councillor Ellis, Councillor Davenport, Councillor Barker. Those against? Councillor Carr, Councillor Bennett, Councillor Munro, Councillor Liu, Councillor Cutts, Councillor Stennett, Councillor Massoud. The motion is lost. I seek another motion.
Madam Mayor, I'm happy to move 9.1.3.
The officer report. Yep.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Is there a seconder?
Happy to second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Liu. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We've sort of skirted around this a little bit, and in fact I slightly misspoke before. I do have concerns about the perhaps what's being outlined in terms of the fast-track process that the government and the Box Hill Institute are seeking, but I certainly endorse what officers have said in response to that, and in terms of representing our community and the concerns that we have in relation to the process. So I think we've touched on parts of the report, and I certainly endorse Councillor Liu's earlier comments in the last debate about the mixed use at the site on Whitehorse Road, and certainly. And certainly I have some sympathy with what Box Hill Institute and the state government are trying to achieve in some of these precincts, and certainly getting the best use of the land that exists in Box Hill, and particularly given the surge in development around Box Hill, it is the right thing to do and the appropriate thing to do. But certainly council doesn't want to be overridden in terms of what its desires are, and we certainly should have a seat at the table, and that's what we're endeavouring to do in terms of our submission, and I would encourage councillors to endorse the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I stand by my earlier comments and I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any speakers against the officer report?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Davenport.
Councillors, I just want to bring your attention to the substantial debate we had in the previous agenda item on 34 to 36 Prospect Street, because a number of elements that we had debated in that particular area are not present in the response that we're putting up tonight. The first is on affordable housing, and whilst I agree with this particular proposal because there is no affordable housing being applied to the area, I am cognisant of the fact that Council's general position is for some affordable housing. And in a building at 16 to 18 Spring Street, Council should consider its position on affordable housing to be consistent with what it applies to other private sector providers, which we've seen tonight. Second is when you look at the artist's impression of the building, the 29-storey building, you'll notice it's one of those special types that was eloquently described by Councillor Barker at the beginning of his speech for his amendment in the previous motion, being a nice, tall, glass, reflective tower with no green walls. Again, we put forward this evening, and it was passed now on what we consider as something we should be looking at for the city in general, and we should be consistently applying those types of principles. And in this particular report, it doesn't cover that particular matter either. Would have covered the further amendment that was raised by Councillor Liu, but given that the bottom 4 stories are for educational use, I think that's it generally covers what we're
Point of
looking
order.
for.
What was the point of order,
Yeah,
Councillor
so
Stennis?
Councillor Davenport, we're going to oppose every planning application that doesn't have a green wall or affordable housing.
I think we just need to consider each agenda item when it comes to us. We're not here to debate policy. Councillor Davenport, you can continue, but I don't
thank you.
believe that's his intention.
Thank you,
for
Mayor.
all.
So what I'm pointing out is that if we're going to apply on the private sector certain conditions, we should be consistent in our approach with how we go to state government, because in this case they're the planning authority, and it is in the end going to be a private sector development, and we should consider those issues to go into the officer's report. I urge you to vote against the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport. Is there a speaker for the motion? Any further speakers against the motion? Then I will put the motion to...
Mayor?
right of reply, Councillor Munro.
Madam Mayor, I thank Councillor Davenport for his contribution. Perhaps struggle to follow consistency a little bit on the affordable housing, but I just, given that Councillor Davenport has said tonight he doesn't support affordable housing, and now he's berating councillors for not having affordable housing or having it part of this report. But I actually did ask Mr Green, sitting next to me, a question just a moment ago, and he advises me that the application for a 29-storey building or whatever it may be will require a planning permit application, and at that stage, councillors, we do have the opportunity to request planning permit conditions for affordable housing and green walls, should we choose, and councillors would have that opportunity. So, unfortunately, Councillor Davenport is putting the cart before the horse tonight, and there is an additional opportunity for councillors to address those issues. What we're talking about is a response. The officer's report being submitted to the process, the public hearing in terms of the fast track process the government is seeking in terms of the changing of the zoning of those particular sites so it can pave a way forward. Councillors, I urge you to support the substantive motion tonight as set out in 9.1.3.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. I will now put the motion to the vote, and we are voting on the officer report for 9.1.3. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried.
Division.
Those in favour? Councillor Ellis, Councillor Carr, Councillor Bennett, Councillor Munro, Councillor Liu, Councillor Cutts, Councillor Stennett, Councillor Massoud. Those against? Councillor Davenport and Councillor Barker. The motion is carried. We now move to 9.2 infrastructure. 9.2.1 is a tender evaluation report for Ballyshannosy Park Sports Fields reconstruction. Do I have a mover?
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Is there a seconder for the motion?
Happy to second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Liu. Councillor Barker.
Oh, thanks, Mayor. This project will be well known to many of you. It's come up through the budget process, and this is the tender evaluation report. Bellashanacy Park is on Highbury Road in Burwood East, and like a number of sites around our great city, this is a former landfill site that was filled in the 1930s and 1960s. And effectively that creates a number of issues today, in particular when rain hits this, well, it's an open park reserve at the moment of sports fields, but when rain hits that, it basically seeps into the former landfill site, so it makes it like a bathtub, if you like, and leachate can seep from that oval. So the council officers, and I congratulate Mr Warner's team for their work on this, because it does minimise the risk to council. And it's also actually reconstructing the oval so that the whole top and the turf is reprofiled with new drainage and whatnot, so that the water can't get into the bathtub where all the former landfill is. Now, that serves a couple of benefits. One, it minimises risk for council, and two, and most really pleasingly, and in a very creative way for the engineers and the technocrats, they're enabling better use of these sporting facilities in terms of improving cricket, football, soccer that can be played on them, and we see again that's so pleasing. The rapid growth in children playing sport in this country. They've gone to tender. The tender report's there. There's not really a lot more to say. I'm satisfied with the process. They've down-selected. You can see the selection mechanism they've used there. It's a provider that's worked for us in the past. Seems I recommend you all to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Councillor Liu.
Thank you. Councillors, I think it's important that we provide grounds that are accessible, open and safe for our community and encourage an active lifestyle. While I believe it's important for us to look at new open space opportunities, I think it's also equally important that we preserve and maintain our existing parks and sporting fields. Bellashanacy is a highly utilised park for casual users and sporting clubs, and the proposed works will ensure the continued use of this field into the future. So I'm happy to support this motion, and I urge my fellow councillors to support this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Liu. Is there any speaker against the motion? Then I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried unanimously. We now move to item 9.2.2, Tender Evaluation Report, Coonung Creek Wetlands Boardwalk Construction. Do I have a mover?
Happy to move, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Liu. Is there a seconder?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Councillor Liu.
Councillors, this item looks at accepting the tender for the reconstruction of the boardwalk in the Coonung Creek wetlands received from Fleetwood Urban Proprietary Limited for the tendered amount of $470,536, including GST, as part of the total expected project expenditure of $546,643, including GST. As you may be aware, Council has an ongoing program to carry out maintenance, renewal and replacement of such assets such as bridges, and in 2013, experienced bridge consultants carried out an inventory and structural condition assessment of all council bridges. From this, a council road bridge and path structural renewal strategy was derived, and this information is used to determine the priorities for the maintenance and renewal program. It was determined through this that the boardwalk in Coonung Creek wetlands is in poor condition, and it has gone beyond regular maintenance. The bridge is in need of reconstruction in order to continue functioning due to its rapid decline. The proposal looks at replacing the old boardwalk with a new one over the wetlands and along the same general alignment. The redevelopment will also include a viewing platform which will allow the public to sit and view the surrounding nature. The materials used are more durable and suitable for the environment and will last much longer and require less ongoing maintenance than its current timber form. It's also worth noting that the open mesh is made out of recyclable plastic as well. The project will also update the current interpretive signs that are currently on site and will also provide information on the different species of waterfowl that can be found in the wetlands. The works are planned to be undertaken during the summer months of the 2017-2018 financial year, and notices will be posted on site in advance of the works when the timing has been confirmed. Tenders were advertised in the Age newspaper on Saturday 26th of August of this year and closed on Wednesday the 20th of September 2017, and 4 tenders were received and were evaluated based on a set of criteria. The successful tenderer, as mentioned previously, is Fleetwood Urban Pty Ltd, and they have a long history of experience in fabricating and installing bridge and boardwalks with in-house design and manufacturing facilities. They've also worked on and successfully completed various pedestrian bridges and boardwalk projects in Victoria and interstate. The tender received by the company is also the most cost efficient as well for this project. Community consultation was also undertaken during the design phase of the boardwalk through various channels with positive responses from social media. Councillors, you are aware that the Coonung Creek wetlands is one of our key bushlands and wildlife corridors in the region. It is a popular space for locals as well as visitors wanting to enjoy nature and wildlife, and this replacement will further enhance this experience. So I'm happy to support this motion, and I hope the other councillors support this motion as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor New. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, it's hard to add much to the very comprehensive introduction that Councillor Lewis provided. I know everyone's familiar with it because they've seen the project come through the budget and the design process, and I would like to congratulate the officers. And note that the really effective part of the consultation was actually the social media, where people interacted with that. We didn't go to them necessarily asking them for their ideas. We received some really great ideas from people, and they've actually been included in the design. And also want to thank our community, Mayor, for their input into it, because we do listen to their input. And one of the great innovations, not just the interpretive signs, which people were happy about, is actually opening up the entranceways so that it is more used. And I also like to thank the officers for involving myself and Councillor Lou, because we were taken down there, talked through it and actually watched it. And it is a very, very well used area, and with the steel screw posts, which is the method of construction, it's going to last a lot longer, and it'll be a facility that we can love and use for many years to come. I recommend you support it. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Are there any further speakers? There being none, I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried unanimously. We now move to 9.3 Human Services, and the first item is 9.3.1 Contract Extension for the Festival's Audio Production. Do I have a mover?
Yes, so move, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cutts. And is there a seconder?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Councillor Cutts.
This recommendation is that Council extend the contract for the festival's audio production with Sound Solutions of South Melbourne, trading as Deluxe Audio on a scheduled rates basis for a period of 2 years, commencing 26th of September 2017. On the 12th of December 2014, Council awarded the contract to this particular company following a public tender process, and the original term was for 3 years with an additional 2-year extension at Council's discretion. Over the past 3 years, Council has received an excellent level of service from this particular organisation with value for money, a high level of professionalism, and as many of us witnessed yesterday at the Whitehorse Festival, Spring Festival, where possibly 15,000 people, something like that, may have turned up, really the audio was wonderful. So I do not see any reason that we should not be moving to accept this particular proposal. What it involves is approximately $44,637, including GST per annum, and councillors, I ask for your support with this particular proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cutts. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Whitehorse Council, as you're all aware, is well renowned for their fantastic events, their festivals, whether that be Spring Festival, Carols by Candlelight, Australia Day festivities, and a whole lot of other things that happen at Whitehorse. So it's really important that we have someone that will do the job well and make us proud. And the fact that they have been awarded a continued contract says that we're obviously very happy with them, and I urge my colleagues to support the recommendation, the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Are there any further speakers to this motion? There being none, I will put this motion to the vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried unanimously. We now move to item 9.3.2, the Whitehorse Health and Wellbeing Plan for 2017 to 2021. Do I have a mover?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. And is there a seconder for the motion?
Happy to second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Councillor Bennett.
Councillors, this motion is that Council adopts the Whitehorse Health and Wellbeing Plan 2017 to 2021. And I do remember actually speaking to the motion when the draft report was about to be put out for public consultation. So a lot of the things that I'll be saying basically the same as before or when that draft consultation was to be put out to the public. So it's arguable that the health and well-being of our citizens is the most important thing that that council does, and I think there's good reason to argue that, because without a healthy and a community that has a sense of well-being, then all the other things that we do are really secondary. So I'd like to congratulate again the officers and the community overall for the work that they've put in and the contributions to this plan over quite a long period, over a 2-year period. So there were nearly 5,000 people from across the municipality, and they were actively engaged in the development of this plan. So it includes things such as diversity, disability, reconciliation, community participation, arts and culture, recreation, early years, youth and healthy ageing. And this plan will also lead to Council's response to climate change and also prevention of family violence. So it'll be a document that will be a living document, and it will be informed by up-to-date data as it comes to hand during that particular period. I note that one of the 5 goals of this plan is to continue to communicate effectively and to actively engage with the community. So it was good to receive a submission from Carrington Health during the public process. And Carrington Health, for those that weren't at the community awards in the business awards on Friday night, the Carrington Health actually won the Mayor's Award. So congratulations, Mayor, for doing that. So it was great to receive a submission from them for this plan, and they want to partner in initiatives especially relating to social inclusion and healthy eating, both very important parts of a healthy and community that has a sense of well-being. We also received a late submission from WATAG, the Whitehorse Active Transport Action Group, who are particularly interested in cycling and walking initiatives, active transport, and that's also a very important component of a health and wellbeing lifestyle. As I have mentioned previously, an area of concern is the high prevalence of dementia in the Whitehorse community compared with the Victorian average, and the health and wellbeing plan addresses that. As we know, it's probably not unexpected in an ageing population such as Whitehorse that that's the case. But there are still anxiety and stress-related mental illnesses that are not just confined to our ageing population, but covers all demographics, as we know, including our young people. So this plan, councillors, identifies that council will facilitate opportunities for social connectedness and support for all our residents, both young and old, and those with special needs. So the Whitehorse Health and Wellbeing Plan 2017-2021 is in step with our council vision and council plan, and is consistent with the policy directions of both state and federal governments, and I seek your support to adopt the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Councillor Bennett has covered all of it quite well. Hasn't left me with much to say, unfortunately. As you're all aware, this is actually a legislative requirement that we too have to have it adopted by the end of October. And it is interesting because I think it covers our diverse population quite well, because we have got a very high percentage of older people within Whitehorse, clearly, but we've also got a lot of younger people and in between. And the diversity needs to be respected within any plan we do prepare. And we have got the 5 community priorities, which were outlined in part by Councillor Bennett, but we have got the 5 key priority areas that we do really need to look at. And I won't go through them all because this is clearly here for everybody to read. But one of the things that I've liked out of the 5 of them, if I have to pick one, is the accessible, safe and welcoming place for all people. I think in this day and age, accessibility is very important, and so is safety. Having safety and knowing you're welcome within your community and you can move freely is something that is very important to all members of our community. I will note that the 2016 census data wasn't available when the draft was first put out for consultation, and as a result anything that's been released in 2017 has been incorporated, and the document has been updated to reflect that. So the demographics that have been presented to us in recent times have been reflected in the final document. So I urge the members of the community to read this document, see what we've got to offer, see how much work's been put in, not just by the staff who have done a magnificent job, but the 5,000 people in our community that contributed to this. They contributed. And anyone out there that reads this and thinks, hey, you've missed something, or more importantly, yes, you've hit the mark, you know next time around when this is being developed, you've got the opportunity to contribute too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Are there any further speakers for this motion? There being none, I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried unanimously. We now move to corporate reports. And item 9.4.1, the annual report for 2016 to 2017. Do I have a mover?
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stennett. And is there a seconder?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. Councillor Stennett.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So Council has already submitted our annual report to the local government minister last month in accordance with our requirements. Once submitted to the local government minister, the Act requires Council to consider the annual report at a meeting of Council as soon as practicable. So that's what we're doing here tonight, considering that annual report that we've submitted. It's been a busy year for Council. We have developed, in consultation with our community, the Council Plan, the 2017 to 2021, and the Health and Wellbeing Plan 2017 to 2021. And as been mentioned before, they have been consistent with Council's longer term direction in our vision from 2013 to 2023, our 10-year vision statement. I'm very proud of how we've gone about that since being elected as a new council group, going out to the community, really listening to our community, and our community should be able to see, if you like, the fingerprints of what they've said, how they've inputted into these plans, these high-level, really important strategic plans that guide everything we do in council, all our decision-making, all the way from our 10-year plan, 10-year vision, 4-year plan, annual budgets, all our key strategies, some of the things we've been hearing tonight in terms of decision-making, referring back to those policies and plans that have that very strong community input. I'm also pleased that we have responded quite positively to the challenges such as rate capping that have been imposed on us, a 2% average rate increase. Within that, we have still maintained a strong financial position, prioritising resources available to meet the demand on our valued community services and assets. And I think the excellent results in our 2017 local government community satisfaction survey bear that out. What I've noticed in reading the annual report is the value of listening to our community and developing strong community partnerships. We have, as a group, a role to play in leadership, but in that leadership we need to listen to our community, and they need to be the ones that can see how the direction of council has been formed with their input. The annual report includes a summary of council's achievements, and we've made, I think, excellent progress on our adopted 10-year vision, and also well on our way to achieving our 4-year plan for the next until 2021. So I'd like to thank all those that were involved, councillors and council officers and staff and volunteers and members of the community that were involved in all the work that has been done in the last 12 months, and I look forward to the next 12 months.
Thank you, Councillor Stennett. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And can I start by endorsing Councillor Stennett's comments about the excellent work of the wide number of people involved in the report, from council throughout the organisation with the council officers. There's a tremendous amount of work that goes into the annual report in terms of all of the elements that make it up, and of course meeting our statutory requirements. Can I just quickly add that it's an excellent document in that it talks about some high quality services that our council is involved in building a stronger community, and also from a financial point of view, it's an outstanding result. The finances of Whitehorse, despite rate capping and the constraints that puts on our revenue, our finances are strong, our balance sheet is quite strong, and we continue to deliver high quality and highly valued services across our community. So I certainly commend the report to council and encourage councillors to support the motion, which is predominantly a technical one, but it is a chance for us to give praise to the efforts of council over the last 12 months as amplified and exemplified in the annual report.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. Are there any further speakers to this motion? There being none, I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried unanimously. We now move to item 9.4.2, the 2017-2018 Annual Internal Audit Plan. Do I have a mover?
Happy to move.
Thank you, Councillor Stennett. Is there a seconder?
Happy to second, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport. Councillor Stennett.
Yeah, thank you. As outlined in the report in your agenda, the internal audit plan has been developed by our council's recently appointed auditors, Crowe Horwath. The internal audit plan is required tonight then to be noted. The Audit Advisory Committee has endorsed that plan at a recent meeting, and that's why we're here tonight to consider and approve that audit plan for the financial year 2017-18. So that plan was developed by our internal auditors in consultation with management, the CEO, general managers, and the Audit Advisory Committee. Those have been there's been consideration of some key principles, mainly to target areas of greatest importance or concern, and where the potential for improvement and risks or loss are the greatest. And with those key principles in mind, there's been a number of areas of focus that have been included in the audit plan that are detailed in that report. So I endorse what's been written here. Of course, I would say that I'm Council's representative on the Audit Advisory Committee, but it's entirely up to you.
Thank you, Councillor Stennett. Councillor Davenport.
Nothing further.
Are there any further speakers to the motion? In that case, I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried unanimously. We now move to item 9.4.3, the Domestic Animal Management Plan. Do I have a mover?
Happy to move, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Is there a seconder?
Happy to move.
Thank you, Councillor Liu.
Second, sorry, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, second. Councillor Carr. Could you put your microphone on, please, Councillor Carr?
Sorry, I must have turned
Thank
it off
you.
by mistake. Apologies. Councillors and Mayor, I am both delighted and relieved to be here tonight to move the DAMP. I'm delighted as responsible animal ownership is a passion of mine, which I make no secret about, and I'm relieved because we have set the way forward. We now know exactly our direction we're heading and our journey to get there. If the DAMP is adopted tonight, one of our next steps will be to conduct a review of off-lead areas. That'll be the second year of the plan. The third year of the plan will address the orders, council orders relating to domestic animal management, and the fourth year will be a review year of what has been achieved and what is still to be done. To date, we have conducted a very broad survey, receiving 96 responses, identifying enforcement of the legislation, education, animal registration issues, cat curfews and off-lead parks as the main issues. In forming the Domestic Animal Management Plan, the committee needed to keep in mind quite a number of statutory obligations under the Act. This wasn't easy, as some I personally don't agree with, as they are too restrictive. We needed to consider off-lead provisions and locations, the introduction of compulsory desexing of cats and dogs, cat and dog prohibited areas and cat curfews. These were in the last 4-year damp plan, and they also formed part of this year plan. So we needed to review and consider our way forward on these issues. I believe councillor officers on Wednesday have a meeting with a professional advisor and statistician to look at all 96 responses. He or she will then write a professional analysis on the competing conflicts between dog owners, non-dog owners and cyclists, in addition to other issues raised by submitters. He or she will also help shape the next survey, which will be quite in-depth and ask questions such as, tell us about the off-lead parks we have. What do you think is lacking in your off-lead park, and what would you like to see? They will also ask questions, obviously, on cat curfews. Now, the submissions that we already received will be considered in the forming of the next questions for the next survey. So we have listened to residents, we have considered their opinions. That's in the formation of this report before us tonight, but they will also be considered when we prepare the next survey. Councillors, if you wish to know how well Whitehorse Council is performing in the area of animal management, I encourage you to log on to the Know Your Council website, which demonstrates Whitehorse City Council's strong performance in animal management as referenced through the Local Government Performance Reporting Framework. I recommend adoption of the Domestic Animal Plan and the forwarding of same to the Department of Economic Development, Jobs, Transport and Resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Councillor Carr had covered quite a lot of the points. I'd just like to add a couple of other things. One of the main focuses moving forward is to look at enhancing communication with stakeholders and public and stakeholder participation in DAMPAC, which I think is a great step forward. The DAMPAC members certainly love their pets. However, as part of the group, we also need to look at the needs of the broader community as well, who may not necessarily own pets. So there is that consideration of balancing the needs and views of different stakeholders as well. Part of the action plan will also look at emerging trends, and certainly with the growing population in the area, and with the growth in pet registrations, exploring more off-lead parks is another item that has been identified, which Councillor Carr had elaborated on, as one of the key issues and will be further explored as part of the DAMP process moving forward. So I certainly look forward to seeing the plan evolve over its life, and I'm happy to support this item and encourage my fellow councillors to support this also. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Liu. Are there any further speakers?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Barker.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm also a passionate animal lover, as many will know. And I'd like to make a couple of points about the DAMP plan and about my delight with which I was informed by council officers that they will be making public the survey results and some of the free comment, obviously redacted, so that we don't disclose anyone's personal information, because I was enormously impressed with some of the contributions to this document. One in particular was a resident from the Elgar Ward, which obviously makes me proud, but it was about 6 pages long and included GIS overlays of maps, and it was a very high quality and sophisticated piece of thoughtful work. It was absolutely superb. And there was also a contribution by one of Council's own bylaws officers, which I thought was excellent, and made some really interesting points around culturally and linguistically diverse people from his own experience with animals and parks in Australia. And that, I suppose, brings me to the point that is so important, is we did listen to people. And 96 people made comment. Not all of them are forced choice, and yes, I understand that these surveys are really difficult, Mayor, to get right. And some people in these commentaries said, oh, your survey's not as good as it could be. Well, okay. But we got some really valuable intelligence, particularly in the free comment. And I'm delighted that we're publicising it, because it shows the people that took the time, whether it was 5 or 6 hours, or whether it was 15 minutes or 5 minutes, that we actually listen to what they say. And we do take it really, really seriously. We do actually listen, and it comes through, that comes through in the policy responses. So I congratulate the DAMP and the council officers. Thank you for being so transparent with it. That's the way we're going to get people to further engage with the process as we go forward. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Are there any further speakers? If not, then I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried unanimously. That takes us to 9.4.4, the Supplementary Valuation Quarterly Report for 1 July 2017 to the 30th of September 2017. Do I have a mover?
Happy to move, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Is there a seconder?
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. Supplementary valuations are conducted regularly throughout the year. This is mainly to provide equity amongst all of our homeowners and our rated residents to make sure that we have got some, as I said, equity between them all. The supplementary valuation occurs as a result of either new dwellings, renovations, etc., which add value to the site. So the fact that our rates have already been sent out, etc., doesn't capture everything that's happening in our municipality. There's often dwellings that haven't been completed and they're on the verge of being completed at the time that they're being assessed for the rates. And it is fair for the rest of the community that they are included in the rates. And to give you an example, in this 3 months period, we got $588,222 of supplementary rates as a result of us re-evaluating the properties that have been completed with their works. And I think this is a fair system. It ensures that nobody times their buildings, their new dwellings, or anything to avoid the rating period. It also makes sure that we also keep in touch with what our CIV across the municipality is, which is very important for us. So I urge all my colleagues to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Councillor Barker.
Oh, Mayor, thanks very much. It's difficult to add to what Councillor Ellis said. I thought she put it beautifully.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? If not, I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried unanimously. That takes us to item 9.4.5, proposed sale of strip of council-owned land adjacent to 55 Dorking Road, Box Hill. Do I have a mover?
Oh, yes, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. And a seconder?
Happy to second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor New. Councillor Barker.
Oh, thanks, Mayor. This is a continuation of the process, which is to dispose of some surplus land. It's 20 square metres, which is actually in someone's backyard. We own it. This was the revenge strip, you might recall. The public doesn't have access to it. It's in someone's backyard. It was one of those historic land portfolio things that come from years ago. I think it's a good outcome for the owners. The council's gone through the process, which is to publicly notify, communicate, and advertise, communicate, and have struck up a private treaty with the people that are there at the moment. They're going to buy it. We're getting $16,000, and this property will end up being get a new rating as well, because it'll be a larger piece of land. There's not much more to add. Yeah, that's the revenge strip. We've done the process. We're selling 20 metres of land in someone's backyard.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Councillor New.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Councillor Barker covered it really well, and I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor New. Are there any further speakers to the motion? There being none, I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. That now takes us to item 9.4.6, Eastern Region Group of Councils, future governance arrangements. Do I have a mover?
Happy to move, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport. Is there a seconder?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Davenport.
Councillors, I'm pleased to be able to support this particular motion this evening by moving it, because it looks at ways where various councils within the Eastern Regional Group can better work together. You will see in the motion there are a number of parts about the governance and commitment, but most importantly the strategic plan, and also granting authorisation to the CEO to enter into a formal agreement. I think there's a lot of benefits in council taking a more active role in the Eastern Regional Group, and there's a number of reasons why. One, as you know, there's Metropolitan Partnerships that is what would you call it, a forum that's of non-elected representatives, mainly being the CEOs of the various councils, as well as a number of NGOs. The Eastern Region Group, which we're proposing this evening, is primarily made of elected council representatives, with CEOs attending as well, but without voting rights. And I think that that's a good approach to the Eastern Region in general, because it means that elected representatives get a seat on the table when determining the future of the region, and therefore carrying forward the community's wishes. There's a number of points I wanted to highlight within the strategic plan this evening, which I think is worthwhile bringing to your attention. The first is having a regional approach does improve advocacy that with state and federal governments. When you have a region of various number of councils representing hundreds of thousands of people, you're more likely to be heard at other levels of government than if you are just one council in itself, because there's a lot more people involved. And having a consistent message to government means that you're more likely to get that position adopted. Secondly, if you look at our planning scheme, you've got different plans across some different parts of the region, and having some way of being better to integrate not just the planning schemes, but planning in terms of spending of ratepayers' money on infrastructure is another important area of consideration. Sometimes when you have one particular facility on the border and another of one municipality and one on the other, then sometimes there can be competition for capital. Having an approach where the region works together means that we can spend ratepayers' money more wisely, but also ensure that services are delivered. And I've got a few examples. Golf, for one instance, performing arts, and also the major regional supporting facilities, which are capital intensive, but you don't need one in every individual municipality. A regional approach is better. And I was quite pleased to see in the action plans, one of them being the trails, the regional trail as one of the items that had been put up, because it shows that you can work together as a region to get a better network and a connected network than if each individual municipality worked in its own. Another idea that was that's put up that's in the draft plan is to look at our libraries to see if we can better join those or work those so we can get more efficiency to increase our collections or loan collection materials at the same costs. And there is a idea to look at the structure of how the regional library corporations work within the municipality. And I think that that's a good example of sharing of resources in order to get a good outcome. In the officer's report, it does cover a number of other highlights, the last point I wanted to raise was about cooperatively working together, especially with the use of specialist staff. With one particular municipality, quite often we use consultants because of the work that we do doesn't need a full-time person. If we're able to pool our resources, we might be able to get more competitive rates through the consultancy field, or alternatively have a shared resource officer on staff that can be used across the municipality. There's a number of benefits with the Eastern Region Group. I urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, yes, I want to reiterate the comments made by Councillor Davenport, but in particular those in relation to the governance arrangements, and I fully support this more formalised approach. I think it's timely that we do have membership consisting of mayors and a nominated council from each of the 6 municipalities. CEOs and a secretariat representative would be ex officio. So this is in direct contrast to the state government initiative of metropolitan partnerships, where community elected representatives are excluded. There's quite a big difference there between those two bodies. So with this Eastern Region group of councils, mayors would be responsible for providing feedback to us on a quarterly basis, and I think that's a most important point. The relationship between the ERG and the existing regional groups, such as the Eastern Transport Coalition, Eastern Affordable Housing Alliance and Eastern Alliance for Greenhouse Action, in my view, will be enhanced because there'll be a closer strategic alignment of agreed or common priorities via better information sharing. And I think that is an important point to make, that information sharing between these bodies and the 6 councils of the ERG is something that is highly positive in my mind, something that's happened but not on such a structured basis. So this is a very important improvement in the arrangements for this new group of councils. So it will also strengthen advocacy arrangements because the ERG will be a single identified voice for the region, but it will still preserve the independence of the participating councils, and that's important as well. So we keep our identity as individual councils, but our strong voice is on a regional basis. So I think the opportunities for economies of scale, as has been mentioned, for shared service delivery outcomes and improved productivity dividends should not be underestimated. So I think the annual commitment continuing to be $30,000 per year in this context, councillors, represents good value for money in my view, and I certainly urge you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Are there any further speakers on this motion? There being none, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried unanimously. We now move to item 9.4.7, meeting cycle, January to December 2018. Do I have a mover?
Happy to move.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Is there a seconder?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Cutts. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. This is a routine report in that it happens twice a year, and we have our meeting cycle outlined for us for the following 6 months. The things that it has in common are the 2 statutory meetings per month occur on a Monday, and we have 3 meetings per month usually. The only difference with this is in the January meeting we meet at the wonderful, historic, beautiful but small meeting room at Box Hill Town Hall, And can I say, for the councillors that have never sat in that chamber, you are in for a real treat. Most of us have sat in that chamber, but there is one councillor, Councillor Barker, that hasn't had the privilege of sitting in the leather seats. Pardon? Sorry?
Continue, Councillor Ellis.
He may
No
have-
interruptions, please.
He may have had the opportunity of checking it out and sitting in it, but not to actually have a meeting where there is a mayor sitting in the big chair with a gavel. And that makes all the difference. So I do look forward to this one trip down memory lane per year. And I know there's a lot of ex-councillors from the Box Hill days that like to appear at that meeting. So it is a very nice occasion to go to that historic building. We only hope we don't have a full agenda and we have crowds of people, because we don't quite know what to do with them in that slightly smaller room. But otherwise, please support this motion to adopt the meeting cycle.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Councillor Cutts.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. As Councillor Ellis has so eloquently described, this is the meeting cycle actually for the whole of 2018, which identifies our special committee meetings, ordinary council meetings and our statutory council meetings. Just one additional thing, obviously if the meeting is on a Monday, public holiday, the meeting will then take place on the Tuesday night following. But really apart from that, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cutts. Are there any other speakers to the motion? There being none, I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried unanimously. We now move to item 9.4.8, adoption of instrument of appointment and authorisation under the Planning and Environment Act 1987. Do I have a mover?
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cutts. And is there a seconder?
Happy to second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Cutts.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is a recommendation that Council approves the proposed appointment of the 3 authorised officers which have been indicated there pursuant to the Planning and Environment Act 1987, and relevant staff including General Manager of City Development, Planning and Building were consulted during the preparation of this proposal, and really there's not much more I can say, so asking councillors to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cutts. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm more than happy to support Emily Killen, Natalie Wells and Sue Sinat to the Planning and Environment Act, for the purpose of the Planning and Environment Act 1987 and the regulations made under that Act. Under Section 232 of the Local Government Act, we authorise the officers generally to institute proceedings for offences against the Acts and regulations described in this instrument. More than happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Are there any further speakers to the motion? There being none, I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. We now move to item 9.4.9, delegated decisions for August 2017. Can I have a mover?
Happy to move.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. And is there a seconder?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Liu. Councillor Munro?
Nothing further to add.
Councillor Liu?
Nothing to further to add to that either. Thank you.
It is a bit procedural. I will put it to the vote. All those in favour? It is carried unanimously. We now move to item 10, reports from delegates, special committee recommendations and Assembly of Councillors records. 10.1 is reports by delegates. So these are committees where you have been nominated as the council delegate. If we can keep them succinct, we're getting on a bit with time, so let's try and get our points across succinctly. I will start with Councillor Stennett.
I'll be very succinct, nothing to report.
Thank you, Councillor Stennett. Councillor Cutts.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I have one report, which is as my position as co-chair with Councillor Carr on the Visual Arts Committee. We met this last month, and it was described during the meeting that the Box Hill Town Hall's art space was open for the first time in the open house, and this was hugely successful and attracted over 200 people to the art space, which was wonderful. We've had the Rennie Ellis show present, and there's also upcoming is the evolution, the art of Roma McLaughlin, which I believe quite a lot of the artwork is in the council offices already, some of the artwork of this particular artist. And given that this actually is from an artist who has been born and raised in the Box Hill area, and most of the art work relates to that area, I would encourage particularly the Elgar Ward councillors to visit this, because it relates very directly to that. But it was a very short meeting, 50 minutes, and we quite enjoyed that. So there we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cutts. Councillor Barker.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll be brief. I attended the Spring Festival on my bicycle on the weekend. It's an excellent day. I used an
That's actually not a committee position.
Oh, okay.
So
Thanks,
this
Mayor.
is where
Sorry.
you're a council
Sorry, Mayor.
representative on a committee. Sorry, Councillor Barker. No committee meetings in the last...
Oh, no, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Councillor Liu.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I just have two things to report. One is the Whitehorse Business Awards Gala Dinner, which was organised by the Whitehorse Business Group, which both myself and Councillor Bennett are a part of, which was held on Friday the 13th of October. It was a wonderful event and a great turnout to support and also acknowledge the achievements of some of our local businesses in Whitehorse City. The second meeting that I just wanted to touch base on is just actually the Box Hill First meeting, which happened today, actually, this afternoon, which was attended by the Mayor and a couple of the other councillors as well. And we actually had Michael Nolan, Chair of the UN Global Impact Cities Program, presenting a visioning exercise looking at sustainability and sustainable cities, as well as private and public partnership opportunities as well. So I find that quite interesting, and also listening to some of the stakeholder feedback regarding how they envision Box Hill sort of moving forward. That was certainly quite insightful. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Liu. Councillor Munro.
No report.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mayor. Just following on from Councillor Liu's mention of the Excellence in Business Awards on Friday, Councillor Liu and I, as delegates to the board, were able to and thrilled to present the Small Business Award on behalf of the City of Whitehorse. So that was a real honour to be able to do that. The other delegate reports with the Eastern Transport Coalition meeting at the City of Greater Dandenong on 21st September. So we had a presentation by the North East Link Authority, and this is the link, as you know, that will link the Eastern Freeway with the, what I call the Western Ring Road, I think M80, but Western Ring Road. So there are four options that are on the table. The preferred corridor to be announced by the end of this year. It will be a toll road. The option from the Bulleen Road exit on the Eastern Freeway through Heidelberg to link up with the Western Ring Road seems to be this is my thinking, seems to be the government's preferred option at this stage, because it's the cheapest, but it does, there's a lot of community angst about that, but what will turn out we will know by the end of this year. We also, our group had a meeting with the Minister Jacinta Allen about our ETC Commuters Count campaign, and that's led to a priority area being looked at as far as bus-related projects are concerned. So that's an interesting development in that space. As we know, as far as the state government commitment of $100 million for cycle and pedestrian improvements, 2 of these strategic cycling corridors are in Whitehorse. So the community engagement process carried out by VicRoads should be released by the end of this month. I'm a delegate on the Metropolitan Local Government Waste Forum, and there was a tour throughout the suburbs to look at how better bins, waste bins, are being used throughout the municipality, and how waste in general is being looked at in innovative ways. So Eltham Skate Park was one area where engagement with youth to try and keep their skate park clean was it was a very interesting way that was being done. Also things to do with dog walkers, how to dispose of dog waste and engage with the dog walkers. One of the most interesting things was the tour of the Eastland Shopping Centre area and how they deal with their waste recovery, something that could very well be instituted in Box Hill and other shopping centres. But that resource recovery initiative at Eastland Shopping Centre was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also attended the visual arts with Councillor Cutts and the Box Hill First with several other councillors. That was this afternoon. Both Councillor Cutts and Councillor Liu have explained both of those meetings, so I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davenport.
Nothing to report.
Councillor Ellis.
Very briefly, on the 3rd of October, the EAHA met with Julia Banks in Burwood Highway, Burwood. That brings to 7 or 8 state or federal MPs, including many ministers, that we've met in the last 18 months. So we're hoping that the message is resonating quite well out there, that we need more affordable housing and we need housing affordability that will assist further down the line. I also attended the Box Hill First this afternoon and it was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. I attended a disability advisory committee meeting where we focused and discussed about a program called Changing Places, which is about having hoists for the disabled in toilets, so a special space with a hoist. Of interest perhaps to Whitehorse is we are applying for funding to put one in at the Nunawading Community Hub. The reason that's a good location is it's well located, close to the Eastern Freeway, Nunawading Station and Whitehorse Road. These are not something that are in every building, but the locations are shared across the community who have the need for that, using that sort of facility. So we did have a look at that and certainly need to consider appropriate locations and key public spaces. There will be a motion at the MAV conference later this week, which will encourage state government to encourage the Changing Places approach and have more facilities through legislation requiring a facility based on certain criteria. Also, it was raised that there's going to be a registration and accreditation of the disability workforce, which hasn't existed previously. I also attended the ERG CEO and Mayor's meeting. That was on the 6th of October and held at Monash, attended by Whitehorse, Manningham, Knox, Maroondah, Yarra Ranges and Monash councils. We looked at the strategic plan, which we've just had a motion about. We also had some discussions about the valuations and I guess whether or not they should be done annually. The other thing we discussed was metropolitan partnerships. We looked at the North East Link and I guess discussed the consultation or lack of, particularly for some municipalities where they feel they have not necessarily been listened to. And that probably covers most of it. I'm trying to be quick given the time. And yes, I chaired today the Box Hill first meeting, which I agree with the speakers that have talked about it tonight. It was extremely interesting and thought-provoking, and hopefully it will engender some good discussions in the future. And there was a mention about the evolution exhibit or in the art space, which I opened on Saturday, and I do recommend that everybody goes and has a look. It's a lovely focus on Box Hill and life. And that's the end of my report. I seek a motion to receive these reports.
So moved.
So
Thank
seconded.
you. Thank you, Councillor Bennett and Councillor Munro. I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. We now move to 10.2, recommendation from Special Committee and Council meeting, and there are none from our Special Committee meeting on the 9th of October. So we then move to item 10.3, record of Assembly of Councillors. Can I have a mover?
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. And a seconder?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Councillor Bennett?
Nothing to add to that.
It is procedural. All right, I put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. That takes us to item 11, report on conferences and seminars and attendance. Councillor Ellis.
Nothing to report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Davenport.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I spent the weekend from Friday until yesterday. I arrived home at 7 o'clock in wonderful Warrnambool, and it was a delightful weekend. Fantastic, well-run event. We had wonderful speakers. We had Susan Alberti, who was just absolutely sensational. She was very moving. She received a standing ovation, and she actually left us, she has authored a book, and she left us with a copy. It's not due to be released until March next year. I'll tell you what, I'll be first in the line to purchase a book. She was just stunning, absolutely. We also heard from several speakers. I'll just highlight a few. The CEO of Ballarat, she gave us the option of a watered-down approach to her report or a warts and all. Needless to say, of course, in a group of women with one gentleman, we did go for the warts and all. She had an internal working group on equity and respect. Now, I can't reveal any of that because we did make an agreement with her that what she spoke about would stay in the room, but it was absolutely enlightening. Kate Sadler from an organisation called I Can spoke on autism program in schools. It's excellent. They receive no funding whatsoever, but they go into the school at the school's request. They have a group and they mentor the children in the school, and then as the children get older, they encourage them to become mentors themselves. So the mentees become the mentors, and it's really good because they have that peer relationship. They're speaking to children who have the same problems as them, so they have that mutual respect for each other. They go on camps. Fantastic program, well done. We also heard from Julie Saylor-Briggs, who is the Councillor Development Officer at the MAV. She was absolutely fascinating, I have to tell you. There are some things I'd love to tell you about her speech, but perhaps in a private situation. It was just amazing. She told us all about her growing up and her life as a Torres Strait Islander. And she returns there 4 times a year, as she was the firstborn in her family, and apparently the father of the family has to accept or reject their children. And if they accept them, they, the oldest born, then becomes the leader, if you like. And as most of them are male, she is a female in that environment, and she travels back 4 times a year to make the laws and to vote on certain things for the island. And it was just fascinating. I'm going to look at her when I go to the MAV professional development meetings in an entirely new light now, I can tell you. We also had a panel of 5 mayors. Now, they were really, really good, and they were honest with their answers from the questions from the floor. It was a little disappointing that there were no metro mayors in that panel. They were all rural mayors, but they were very, very good. It was also my pleasure to be a guest speaker at this event. I did have a short speech, and I was invited to present the bursary award. I've been the coordinator of the Algor Bursary Award for a number of years now. I've been involved in it as a co-coordinator for about 3 years, and for the last 6 or 7 I've been the coordinator of the event. And it's my pleasure to do it. It's time consuming, it's wonderful. So I gave everyone a background on what the Bursary Award is all about and how the judges assess independently the submissions that come in, and they have no idea of how each of the judges has voted. And that was it was really good, and it was a pleasure to actually be part of the conference as well as attending. And I was pleased I was there on the first day, so for the rest of the weekend I could relax, as in my speech was just after morning tea on the first day, so I had the rest of the time to myself to relax and listen to others. So it was really, really good. I was very impressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Bennett.
Nothing to report, Mayor.
Councillor Munro.
No report.
Councillor Liu.
Nothing to report, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Barker.
Nothing, Mayor.
Councillor Cutts.
Nothing to report, Mayor.
Councillor Stennett.
Ditto.
Okay. I haven't been to any conferences or seminars, but I thought I would like to share. I know Councillor Barker was wanting to speak about Spring Festival, and I received an email today that I'd like to read out, and it highlights what a great job our staff did for Spring Festival. I won't identify the community organisation, but it said the weather combined with all the myriad of activities available brought so many residents out to play. It was a fabulous showcase of the community groups in the city of Whitehorse. This particular group were very happy with their position, and they found the people passing by were very interested in what they had to offer and their local Whitehorse projects. They also complimented, they say, can I compliment the council staff on the manner that they carried out their tasks? Nothing was too much trouble when we requested more chairs and had to open the Art Centre storeroom for our banners. They were all so very helpful in the morning, helping to carry our bags and brochures. All the best for your upcoming events, and that how well done our staff have done, and said well done Whitehorse Council. That's a bit of a rough one. I did receive some others, but I thought that was nice that it acknowledged how helpful the staff were, that they all worked in a collaborative way and supported the community organisations. And so I think I would like to acknowledge and ask that the staff are advised that we've had some very positive feedback about such a successful day. And I'm sorry I cut you off before, Councillor Barker. All right, I ask somebody if you could receive the report
Happy
on
to move,
conferences
Madam
and
Mayor.
seminars. Thank you, Councillor Carr. Is
Happy
there
to
a
second.
seconder? Thank you, Councillor Cutts. I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. That brings us to item 12, confidential reports, and there are none tonight. So as I come to item 13, as this is my last meeting for the mayoral term, I'd like to express my appreciation and sincere thanks to everybody in the chamber. You have made it an absolute pleasure, and I have enjoyed it. We've had occasionally some challenging moments, but generally it's gone really well, and I certainly have appreciated the professional manner in which you have all participated in debate, and so I thank you. I thank the gallery for attending tonight, and good evening. Thank you.